Kenny "Snake" Stabler was more than just a quarterback. He was a renegade, a playmaker, and a legend who embodied everything the Raiders stood for. With his fearless gunslinging style and ice-cold confidence, he led the Raiders to glory, becoming one of the most electrifying players of his era. He didn't just play football, he lived it, with the swagger of a rock star and the instincts of a warrior. But behind the highlights, the game was quietly taking its toll. The years of brutal hits, late-night celebrations, and the relentless pursuit of victory came with a price. And in the end, that same reckless, fearless approach that made him an icon may have been what led to his tragic downfall. What really happened to the Snake? Why did his final years unfold the way they did? The truth is far more heartbreaking than anyone ever expected. Born to break the rules, the making of a maverick, Kenny Stabler was never meant to be a by-the-book quarterback. He didn't fit the mold of a disciplined, straight-laced field general. He was wild, unpredictable, a quarterback with the soul of a gambler and the instincts of a gunslinger. From the moment he first picked up a football, it was clear. Stabler wasn't just playing the game. He was rewriting the rules. A natural talent with a rebel spirit. Growing up in Foley, Alabama, young Kenny was as smooth on the field as he was off it. His nickname, Snake, wasn't just about his quick release. It was about his ability to slip away from trouble, both on the field and in life. His high school coaches marveled at his natural ability, but there was one problem. He hated structure. Stabler wasn't interested in rigid game plans or playing it safe. He wanted to improvise, to play with instinct, to take risks no coach could ever draw up on a chalkboard. Bear Bryant's biggest frustration. When he arrived at the University of Alabama, he found himself under the command of legendary coach Bear Bryant, a man who demanded discipline and precision. It was a perfect clash of opposites. Bryant was the ultimate taskmaster, and Stabler was the ultimate improviser. At times, the relationship seemed doomed. Bryant couldn't stand Stabler's off-the-field antics, his tendency to party, and his unwillingness to conform. There were moments when it seemed like Stabler would never see the field. But then, the magic happened. When Stabler played, it was impossible to ignore his talent. He could extend plays with his legs, make impossible throws look effortless, and command an offense with the kind of confidence that made everyone around him believe they could win. Bryant may not have liked Stabler's rebellious ways, but he knew one thing: Snake was special. And when the game was on the line, there was no one he'd rather have under center. Destined to be a Raider. Even in college, Stabler played the game with the same swagger that would one day define him as a Raider. He wasn't just looking to win, he was looking to dominate, to have fun, to prove that football was meant to be played with passion, not just precision. He was never meant to be a system quarterback, never meant to follow someone else's playbook. He was meant to be exactly what the Raiders were built for: a rule breaker, a showman, a fearless leader who thrived in chaos. Before he ever put on the silver and black, he was already the perfect Raider, the wild gunslinger, leading the Raiders to glory. By the time Kenny Stabler took over as the full-time starting quarterback for the Oakland Raiders in the early 1970s, it was clear this wasn't just another talented passer. Stabler wasn't just playing quarterback. He was embodying the very essence of what it meant to be a Raider. Bold, unpredictable, and fearless, he played the game like a high-stakes gambler who always bet on himself, and more often than not, he won. The heart and soul of the Raiders. Stabler didn't just lead the Raiders, he was the Raiders. With his cool demeanor, devil-may-care attitude, and uncanny ability to pull off miracles when all hope seemed lost, he became the undisputed leader of the most feared team in the NFL. His connection with legendary coach John Madden was undeniable. Madden trusted Stabler in a way few coaches trusted their quarterbacks. If there was time on the clock and Snake had the ball in his hands, the Raiders believed they could win. Fearless throws and impossible comebacks. It wasn't just about the wins, it was how Stabler won. He didn't just play football, he performed. No throw was too risky, no window too tight, no game ever truly out of reach. The Sea of Hands game, 1974 playoffs, down to the Miami Dolphins in the final seconds. Stabler scrambled, nearly sacked, and somehow lofted a perfect pass into the end zone as he was going down. Clarence Davis came down with it in a swarm of defenders. It was one of the greatest plays in NFL history. The Ghost to the Post, 1977 playoffs. Against the Colts in double overtime, Stabler uncorked a deep, perfect pass to tight end Dave Casper that led to a legendary victory. The Holy Roller, 1978. The controversial last-second fumble play against the Chargers that epitomized the Raiders' outlaw reputation. These moments weren't just highlights. They were proof that Stabler was different. While other quarterbacks played it safe, he thrived on chaos. Super Bowl XI, the ultimate prize. For years, the Raiders had been close. Heartbreaking losses, controversial calls, and near misses had plagued the franchise. But in 1976, Stabler finally led them to the mountaintop. Super Bowl XI against the Minnesota Vikings was the defining moment of his career. The Raiders dominated from start to finish, with Stabler orchestrating an offense that put up 32 points against one of the best defenses in NFL history. It was the Raiders' first Super Bowl victory, and Snake was at the center of it all. But despite his role in leading the Raiders to their long-awaited championship, Stabler never quite got the credit he deserved. His name wasn't mentioned alongside the greats like Terry Bradshaw or Roger Staubach, despite having just as much talent, if not more. Was it because of his rebellious nature, his off-field lifestyle? Whatever the reason, one thing was clear to anyone who watched him play. Stabler was special, a one-of-a-kind gunslinger who made the game unforgettable. The cost of chaos. Stabler's off-field lifestyle. Kenny Stabler didn't just play football with reckless abandon. He lived his life the same way. While most quarterbacks spent their nights watching game film and following strict regimens, Stabler was out drinking, dancing, and embracing the wild side of fame. He was the ultimate rock star quarterback, and for a while it seemed like nothing could slow him down. But did the same chaos that made him great eventually come back to haunt him? The life of a Raider, on and off the field. Stabler was as famous for his antics off the field as he was for his brilliance on it. He was the kind of player who could lead a game-winning drive on Sunday after spending all night at the bar on Saturday. Stories about his wild lifestyle became legendary. He would show up to practice late, sunglasses on, shaking off the effects of the previous night. He partied with celebrities, musicians, and anyone who could keep up with him. He was known to sneak out of team hotels before games, living as if consequences didn't exist. But somehow, none of it seemed to matter. Stabler kept winning. As long as he was delivering jaw-dropping plays on Sundays, the Raiders and their fans weren't going to question how he spent his time during the week. The fine line between strength and weakness. There was a certain magic in the way Stabler played football, and many believed his laid-back, live-in-the-moment attitude was what made him special. He never let the pressure get to him. In the biggest moments, he was ice cold. His ability to make impossible throws under extreme duress was unmatched. And part of that was his mentality. He wasn't afraid to fail. But as the years wore on, the lifestyle began to take its toll. His body, already battered from years of playing in an era where quarterbacks had little protection, started breaking down. His reaction time slowed, his throws lost a little zip, and those miraculous last-second comebacks became rarer. Some wondered, had he burned too bright, too fast? Did the partying cut his prime short? By the early 1980s, it was clear Stabler was no longer the same player. While other great quarterbacks of his era adapted and extended their careers, Snake seemed to fade quickly. The Raiders moved on from him in 1980, trading him to the Houston Oilers. And though he had flashes of brilliance, he was never quite the same. Some believe that if he had taken better care of himself, his career could have lasted longer. Others argue that Stabler wouldn't have been Stabler without the chaos, that his unshakable confidence and fearlessness came from the same reckless abandon that fueled his nightlife. Either way, the price of greatness was becoming clear. The game had given Stabler everything, but it had also taken a toll, one that would become even more evident in the years to come. The fallout, betrayal, trades, and a bitter exit. Kenny Stabler was the ultimate Raider, a fearless gunslinger, a Super Bowl champion, and the heart of the silver and black. But in the NFL, loyalty only lasts as long as you can produce. By the late 1970s, the same team that once embraced his wild, unpredictable nature began to see him as expendable. The man who had given everything to the Raiders suddenly found himself on the outside looking in. The breaking point. Was Stabler forced out? Stabler's relationship with the Raiders started to fracture in the late 70s. After their Super Bowl XI victory in 1976, the team was still competitive, but something was changing. Injuries, age, and a decline in performance led to whispers. Was Stabler still the right guy to lead the Raiders? Al Davis, the powerful and often ruthless owner of the Raiders, had always admired Stabler's talent, but he also had a strict vision for his team. Stabler's off-field lifestyle, which had been tolerated in his prime, became more of a concern as his play began to decline. Davis wasn't known for sentimentality. If he felt a player's best years were behind him, he wouldn't hesitate to make a move. The turning point came in 1979 when the Raiders suffered a rare losing season. Stabler threw 22 interceptions, by far the worst mark of his career. Davis, never one to sit still, started to explore his options. The painful trade to Houston, a stunner for Raiders fans. Then in the offseason of 1980, the unthinkable happened. Stabler was traded to the Houston Oilers for quarterback Dan Pastorini. The deal sent shockwaves through the Raiders fan base. Stabler wasn't just a quarterback. He was the embodiment of the Raiders' rebellious spirit. For Stabler, it was a gut punch. He had spent a decade in Oakland, giving his blood, sweat, and soul to the team. Now he was being shipped off to a team he had no connection to, forced to start over in unfamiliar territory. Struggles outside of Oakland. A legend fades. The move to Houston never felt right. The Oilers' system wasn't built for Stabler's style of play, and the magic that had once defined him seemed to fade. Without the Raiders' mystique, and without the deep trust he had built with teammates like Fred Biletnikoff and Cliff Branch, he struggled. He had brief stops with the New Orleans Saints as well, but it was clear Stabler was never quite the same outside of Oakland. Did the Raiders regret letting him go? In true Raiders fashion, the team rebounded quickly after Stabler's departure. With Jim Plunkett at quarterback, they won another Super Bowl just a year later in 1980. But still, many fans couldn't shake the feeling that Stabler was the Raiders. Even today, the debate rages on. Did Al Davis make the right call? Or did the Raiders turn their back on one of their greatest icons before his time was truly up? The silent battle, the disease no one saw coming. For years, Kenny Stabler had been known for his toughness. He took brutal hits, played through pain, and never showed fear. But long after he threw his last touchdown, a different battle began, one that no amount of grit or determination could overcome. The hidden toll of a violent game. Football had given Stabler everything: fame, fortune, and a place in history. But it had also taken something from him. Decades of bone-crushing hits had left their mark, not just on his body but on his mind. Like many former players, he began experiencing symptoms that couldn't be ignored. Memory loss, confusion, mood swings. At first they seemed minor, but as the years passed, they worsened. Stabler, always the private warrior, rarely spoke about his struggles. He kept smiling, kept telling stories, and kept living life the way he always had. But those closest to him saw the changes. The sharp-witted quarterback who once dissected defenses with ease now struggled to remember simple things. The man who once led dramatic fourth-quarter comebacks now found himself lost in everyday moments. The diagnosis that came too late. For years, Stabler's condition remained a mystery. It wasn't until 2015, after his passing, that the truth was revealed. He had suffered from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, a degenerative brain disease caused by repeated head trauma. The discovery was heartbreaking, but not surprising. Stabler had played in an era when concussions were shrugged off as getting your bell rung. He had endured hit after hit, often without medical evaluation. There was no concussion protocol in his day, just smelling salts and a pat on the back before going back into the game. By the time the world learned what had been happening inside Stabler's brain, it was too late. Did football take too much from the snake? Fans who had idolized Stabler as a fearless, indestructible gunslinger were now faced with a painful reality. The game he loved had betrayed him. The same sport that made him a legend had also left him with an invisible, incurable disease. His battle with CTE wasn't just his own. It was part of a much larger, troubling pattern in the NFL. How many other legends had suffered the same fate? How many more would follow? Kenny Stabler had fought every battle on the field with reckless abandon, but this was a fight he never saw coming, and in the end, it was the one he couldn't win. One last wish, the Hall of Fame. Snub. Kenny Stabler had given everything to football. He was a Super Bowl champion, an MVP, and one of the most exciting quarterbacks of his era. His legendary comebacks, fearless leadership, and undeniable impact on the game were cemented in NFL history. Yet for decades, one honor eluded him, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Why was he kept out for so long? Despite his resume, Stabler was repeatedly passed over for Canton. Voters criticized his career numbers, pointing to his high interception totals and relatively short prime. But those who watched him play knew statistics could never measure his greatness. Stabler was never about padding stats. He was about winning. He thrived in chaos, delivered in the clutch, and played the game with a swagger that defined an entire era of Raiders football. Yet year after year, he was denied the gold jacket he had more than earned. While lesser quarterbacks found their way into the Hall, Stabler remained on the outside looking in. It felt personal. Fans, former teammates, and Raiders legends voiced their frustrations, but the Hall refused to budge. The fight for his legacy. As the years went on, the frustration turned into a mission. Stabler's family, along with his loyal fan base, pushed harder than ever for his induction. They knew his time was running out, his health was declining, and the honor that should have been his was slipping away. But the Hall of Fame committee remained silent. In 2015, Stabler lost his battle with cancer. He passed away at the age of 69, never knowing if he would receive football's highest honor. Too little, too late. Just months after his passing, the Hall of Fame finally made the decision that should have been made years earlier. Kenny Stabler was selected for induction. It was a bittersweet moment. Fans celebrated, but they also mourned. Stabler's family accepted the honor on his behalf, but he was not there to experience it himself. He never got to wear the gold jacket, never got to give a speech, never got to stand on that stage in Canton and hear the cheers he had long deserved. The Hall of Fame had finally done the right thing, but for many, it was too little, too late. A legend like Kenny Stabler should have been honored while he was alive. Instead, he became yet another reminder of how slow the football world can be to recognize greatness. A legend's farewell. Remembering the snake, Kenny Stabler was more than just a quarterback. He was a symbol of everything the Raiders stood for. Gritty, fearless, unapologetic. He played the game his way, never backing down, never playing it safe. His style was chaotic, but in the madness, there was magic. He led the Raiders to their first Super Bowl title, pulled off some of the most legendary plays in NFL history, and gave fans memories that would last a lifetime. But did football take more from him than it gave? The cost of greatness. Stabler lived for the game, but the game didn't always love him back. The Raiders eventually moved on. The Hall of Fame made him wait. The hits he took on the field caught up with him in ways no one saw coming. By the time the world gave him the respect he deserved, it was too late for him to enjoy it. Did the NFL and the Raiders do right by Stabler? Fans still debate it today. Should the Raiders have treated him better at the end of his career? Did the Hall of Fame disgrace itself by waiting until after his passing to enshrine him? Did the NFL do enough to help players like him who gave everything to the game? There are no easy answers. But one thing is certain, Kenny Stabler's legacy is untouchable. The snake lives on. He may be gone, but his legend lives forever in the hearts of Raiders fans. Every time someone watches the Ghost to the Post, remembers his Super Bowl heroics, or tells a story about the wild, unpredictable, unstoppable snake, his spirit endures. Now we want to hear from you. Was Kenny Stabler the greatest quarterback in Raiders history? Did the NFL and the Hall of Fame fail him? Share your thoughts and memories in the comments, and let's keep his legacy alive. And if you want more legendary Raiders stories, check out the other videos on the channel. because the silver and black never forget their own.